So, good morning, Nikki and Anders. I'm going to use first names, and I've got the right first name this time. I'm going to use first names to preserve confidentiality, etc. But this video will be edited a bit if need be, and posted on the OCC news feed and to our social media. And the purpose is to raise the profile of Ciguatera poisoning amongst cruisers. Anders is a physician from Gothenburg. I'm a former physician from Mid Wales. As you can imagine, neither Gothenburg nor Mid Wales have an awful lot of Ciguatera poisoning. So we are the so-called experts who actually know nothing. Um, Nikki, of course, is just recovering from a bad dose of Ciguatera, has read up all about it, and is going to educate Anders and I. Nikki, tell me, where were you? What did you eat? How long ago? And tell us the story. Where were you in it when you got struck, and how long after your fishy feast did it come on?
Sure. We were in the Tuamotu archipelago of French Polynesia, and I am now just past 1 month of since the poisoning came on, and there was no question of whether or not the I had been poisoned. My husband is was a fisherman when we were in university. That was how he worked in the summer and paid his way through school. Uh, we have been in areas that have Ciguatera, especially in the Bahamas and the French Antilles. So we're quite aware of it. We've been sailing full time for almost 9 years. Um, but we just didn't understand how much worse the factor was here in French Polynesia, and particularly in the Tuamotu, in the atoll-shaped islands, where that's part of the process of the development of an atoll. There's always dying coral. It's a dinoflagellate that lives on dying coral, excuse me, dead or dying coral. And then fish eat that, the little fish eat that, and then bigger fish eat the little fish, and that just keeps on working up the food chain. The ciguatoxin lives in the fatty tissue of creatures. So I have been storing it up as I eat fish wherever I've eaten fish. You get a body load, a lifetime load. Some of it goes away, your body's able to process it, but in general, you carry a body load. We asked a lot of local folks. We had 3 or 4 different guides for what fish were safe, what fish weren't. Jamie's very, very careful about that. However, we got some bad advice on shore from a local fisherman who, Jamie's French is good, so they had a really good conversation about what was safe, what was not, and we were mistaken in how much fish we ate. I think over the course of almost a month, we had reef fish 4 times. They were always small, they say not bigger than your dinner plate. And
What
be
what
choosy about where you catch it.
what species in particular? I mean, parrotfish and barracuda are the
Uh, well, again, the barracuda, I would never, ever, ever eat a barracuda unless I knew for sure that they are safe in the place that they were. For example, in Guadeloupe, in the Caribbean, never eat a barracuda. In Grenada, up to a certain size, there's no question of it being safe to eat a barracuda. So you learn locally what there is. The fish that I think was probably the one that got me was a marbled grouper. So it's the fish, a marbled grouper. It's the fish that are the predators in the area of the bommies. So you have the little fish and all the rest. You've got grouper,
red
certain
snapper.
kinds of snapper. We had coral trout. So
More,
the
more
four
rarely
fish were
used.
Yeah.
Marine.
So really different. Oh, go ahead, Anders.
I think marine eels I read is very
Oh
suspicious.
yeah, yeah, we already knew totally
Yeah.
avoid any eels. You just do not. They all have Ciguatera in them.
Wow. Okay. So I interrupted you, Nikki. I'm sorry. So carry on
Oh,
with your.
no worries.
It's fascinating. I was letting you catch breath. So carry on.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm fine if you ask specific questions. Otherwise, I I've learned so much. It could go on and on.
I will butt in from time to time because that's the way I'm inclined. But do go ahead. So
Yeah.
you're telling us about the week or so you had been feasting on reef fish in various restaurants. In which atoll was this in the Tuamotus? Was that in Makemo or?
Makemo. We had, as I said, that we had the four fish over the course of about 4 weeks, not close together. And whatever fish we ate on shore, we didn't, it was tuna. It was that poisson cru, the wonderful, raw fish in the coconut milk, which was always a tuna or a bonito. So the reef fish, I do believe, were all reef fish that Jamie caught and we consumed. Um, but uh, it comes on so quick, or it did for me. It came on so quickly. We had just had a wonderful meal of Jamie had carefully, the cytotoxin stores in their brains and their livers and the sclera, the parts of near the spine. So he had only cut off the fillets, no skin, just had a simple little fillet with pasta. And afterwards, some friends were leaving the anchorage, and I blew our conch horn, which is something I do all the time, and I got dizzy, which is just not typical. And it wasn't just dizzy. I also felt short of breath, and I said something to Jamie right away. And then within 10 minutes of that, I was feeling more like I was wheezing and concerned. And then I just got the worst smashing headache of my life, and all my teeth
So
hurt.
this came before you had any GI symptoms.
Pardon?
This is start with the symptoms before you had any GI symptoms.
This is what's interesting. I had no GI symptoms, no vomiting, no nausea.
I read in the literature that that happens. I mean, the normal case is that you get GI within 4 hours and you get subsequently neurological or even cardiovascular problem if you are unlucky. But
Yes.
there are cases where it starts with the neurological, and I assume that means that you can also maybe live without this. So.
Yeah, and Dr. Prevost, who has been wonderful here in Tahiti, he said actually it's probably better if you have GI symptoms because you do eliminate some of what's already in your gut. Since I have the additional complication, I had already been under treatment for a severe ear infection. So, some of these, it's hard to know for sure. Especially when it was first happening, was it the ear? Was it a reaction to the medication? Because I was on multiple medications, and then it was just clear. No, this is Ciguatera.
So Nikki,
as you mentioned, yeah, sorry.
Can I just recap? I think you said that you developed what are obviously neurotoxic symptoms within 15 minutes of that fishy feast. Is that right?
Yep. And by an hour, I was fully engaged in the strong headache, and it just like my whole front of my face ached, my jaw, it felt like my teeth were all going to fall out. In the night, it was so strange. I think I described it in a few places as if there was an anaconda on each leg working its way up, and it was just this deep muscle ache, just like the deepest ache you can imagine, and it traveled up, and then the itching started. The here in French Polynesia they call it la gratte, which means the itch.
So you just
So that was what started in the
Did you also experience? I read that it's common that you get some kind of burning sensation in the skin from cold water, and probably you haven't seen any cold water for a while.
It's interesting that we knew that that was something to be concerned about. Did you get the reverse sensation for temperature, either for very hot, for hot, or for cold?
Yeah.
For me, the only time I feel it is with beverages. So right now, see, this is this is a room temperature bottle of Schweppes.
at 30 degrees.
So I have my room temperature everything. Jamie makes my espresso in the morning, and he puts cold water into a big mug with my espresso, and I drink tepid espresso because coffee is a necessary thing for me. Now I'm glad I can have that, because some people can't have caffeine for 6 months, maybe.
I read that, yeah.
Going back there, Nikki. So the first thing you got were those what we call neuropathic pain. Those nerve fibers sending off aberrant pain signals. Very intense pain, as you're describing. And that was generalized. It wasn't in a particular group of nerves. It was symmetrical across the face. It wasn't on the side of your bad ear or anything like that.
No, it was all over, and in the night, because really the symptoms probably reached their peak the middle of the next day. I had hallucinations. Fortunately, I remember that I hallucinated things. I don't remember what it was. Jamie certainly remembers me telling him. But I have not very much recollection of the first 2 days anymore.
The first thing to come was the peripheral nerve pain, but then you developed the central nerve effects, which is your hallucinations. But I'm also curious, you mentioned that you had some wheeziness. Have you got a history of asthma or anything like that in the past, or was that caused by disruption of the sympathetic nerves or controlling bronchoconstriction, etc.? Or do you have asthma?
No, I just think it was a nervous reaction. That's something I knew, my body knew something was going on. I have exercise-induced asthma, so that's why I describe it that way. But it was more like a tightness in my chest that I misidentified at first.
As I have a respirology background and hyperreactivity of the airways is a core symptoms of asthma, even if you are in asymptomatic stages. And what we know that Ciguatera is doing is that it affects ion channels in the nerve ending. So I could very well think that it causes an increased hyperreactivity, and that may have caused your wheeziness.
Interesting.
And I get to complicate one more quick thing. I get to complicate it even further in that. Forgot to turn off 16. I get to complicate it further in that I already take a daily medication for neuropathic pain. I have degenerative spinal arthritis and residue of a car accident that damaged my neck rather badly. So I take a drug daily for that already. So I'm hoping, and the doctor agrees, that possibly I could have had worse symptoms if I were not already taking duloxetine.
Duloxetine.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't do well with gabapentin, so I take duloxetine.
That's fine. Okay. No, very interesting, fascinating. So first of all, the peripheral symptoms, then the itching, and then the central symptoms. Well, I guess the headache, and followed by the dizziness is a central system. So that's the toxin crossing the blood-brain barrier and triggering off those effects. So the first 24 hours you were pretty much in crisis. Any effect on heart rate, apart from obviously you're anxious about this, so probably a bit tachycardic anyway. But were you aware of any change in heart rate, which is what people talk about?
Yeah, we did get the blood pressure cuff out right away. We both monitor that, and I have very low blood pressure generally, and it was even lower than usual. I even saw an 85/60 on one of the readings, and my pulse was very high, which I think more reflects my anxiousness. So my normal resting heartbeat is around 70, and I was generally seeing 95 or so for my heartbeat.
But also normal physiology. When if you have a significant down regulation of your blood pressure, your heart should respond with an increase in heart rate. So so that may very well have been the reason.
Yeah.
Did you have no nausea whatsoever?
Never had any nausea.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nikki, please continue your story. It's fascinating.
And I think one of the things that that is most important is, sort of talking about my particular symptoms. I think it's helpful. It's interesting. People know, but every case is unique. There are sort of packages of symptoms that people experience, but that the thing that's really clear is each one is different. You can't say to a person, oh, based on what happened to you, do X, Y, and Z. So that is challenging because
what you're describing is very much what you'd expect from a neurotoxin that's slowly working or quickly working its way around the body. 15 minutes is an incredibly short period of time. I'm guessing that at no point did you have any fever or anything else that you would normally associate with a gastroenteritis or a food poisoning that you might get from the fish. This is all pure neurotoxin, making acutely anxious. So did you have medical support at that stage, or were you in the middle of nowhere? Were you next to the dock in Camo, or were you anchored 20 miles away at the other end of the atoll?
No, and I'm thinking back. We moved from somewhere more remote to Macamo. So I'm not remembering where we had been, but so the symptoms started. There was no care, nothing anywhere nearby, and then so we moved. Jamie moved the boat overnight while I slept to Macamo, and there at the health clinic, there is a local Polynesian plant that now has some research behind it that shows it does have it has some effectiveness. So I think I got it was a very special. You had to go exactly to the right tree. It had to be the yellow leaves right before they're going to fall off the tree. The physician's assistant showed Jamie just exactly how many leaves, how to fold it up, put it into 1 liter of water, steep it for this long, strain it, and then I had to drink it, as quickly as was comfortable. So I probably finished it in about 8 hours, and it really made a huge difference. The amount of itching dramatically reduced. Now, would it have happened anyhow? I don't know. There's no way to know, but it really did. That improved. The gripping type of pain was relieved. The headache, the really intense headache, relieved. So now it's more a case of if I avoid.
What was the time span from how soon after you started to drink it did you sense the relief? Can you say that it temporarily connected?
I would say it was that I was, again, I'm a very hopeful person. So it's like, I'm going to believe that this is going to work. Even if it's a placebo, I'm going to believe it's going to work. However, by about 2 hours after finishing the whole liter, I could feel a difference. I could feel, you kind of that degree of, okay, if you're on a 1 to 10 scale, you've had a 9 headache. And even with taking paracetamol and other things and staying really well hydrated, and it reaches its way down to an 8, But then after drinking this infusion and then sleeping and then getting up the next day, it was more like a 4. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. So
did you have the sense that it had any kind of diuretic effect?
It might have, but I've also been drinking.
No, just no.
Yeah, as much water as I can. I just, if there's any way to flush anything through, I'm going to stay as hydrated as I possibly can.
There any?
Yeah, but it did seem, and Jamie being the person who could watch and say, is there any kind of a difference? Since he had been monitoring me at that point for 3 days, to him, he feels like it was dramatic. So he also believes that whatever that was worked.
Are there any theories local the mechanism of how that might have worked, Nikki? As you know, the clinic say, you know, this is a great treatment for itch or whatever. They just gave you the leaves and made the distillate and suck it and see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was funny because Jamie asked, well, how situations. Yeah, he said, how often do I have to find more leaves? How often do I need to do this for her? And the physicians, again, this is all in French, and so there wasn't 100% great communication, but good enough. He said, not again. This one time is what you do to bring things down to a better level. So whatever this thing is that traditional Polynesians have used was to help with the initial horrible symptoms and to bring it to something more manageable, because it's not, you know, everyone acknowledges this is not something you get over quickly. You know, this is a longer term neurological issue, and everybody has to learn what their triggers are, what the things that they will have to avoid, possibly for life. And that's just the way.
This is super interesting. Did they tell you how late you could start the treatment after your start of symptoms and still having effect of it? Would it help even if you had waited a week?
I don't know. Yeah,
I'm
Jay,
asking because the only treatment that is suggested in the literature is mannitol, and it should be within 10 hours. And the idea is that it should reduce the edema nerve endings. But
yeah, and I think this is similar. Again, I didn't go with Jamie. I wasn't well enough to get in and out of the dinghy, so he had gone ashore on my behalf. And again, this person said, as soon, you know, he said, "Oh, I wish we could have done this right away, but this will still be helpful." And then Jamie said, "Well, how many times do I have to go find more leaves and give her this again?" And he said, "No, it's just the one time. You just do it the one time."
Are these leaves that you could dry and have on board in your ship pharmacy, or do you need to find them fresh?
He also said, no, you have to get them at just the right place fresh and use that. This is when it will work.
Going back to the clinic, did they give you any idea, or give Jamie any idea, how often they see people with Ciguatera in that particular atoll? Just for other people's benefit, Makemo is a remote atoll in the Tuamotus, with a population of, I don't know, a few hundred people, I'm guessing. A fairly high, at this time of year, number of cruisers coming through, very few land tourists, and very few restaurants. So maybe one or two, I think. So just in that context, do they see one a year, one a month? Did they give you any indication of frequency?
I don't know if Jamie had asked that, but both the physician's assistant he saw at that little health clinic in Makemo and the doctor that I'm seeing here in Tahiti, it appears that, oh yeah, they have to deal with this, that it's not an uncommon
event. It's actually something they're well familiar with, and presumably cases don't get reported. They are just treated.
Yeah, that's my thing.
By unlicensed treatments, but licensed treatments, the unlicensed treatments, which in your case appear to have worked, which is great news. Just tell me about going back to the itch. The itch was everywhere. Did you get any redness or any urticarial type symptoms with that? Any wheals coming up? Did it respond to antihistamines? Did it respond to steroids? Is it anything other than the leafy distillate that actually made a difference to it? And time, of course.
No wheals, no rashes, nothing like that. The one place where I did see spotting was on my hand. My fingers all felt swollen, and there were red areas. Not raised at all in the skin, but you could see in the vascularity of the palm, red spaces, and it it wasn't like an overall whole body itch. It was just there were certain areas that would become very itchy, particularly if I overexerted myself. Exertion is a huge issue with this, which is not going to be an easy thing for me. I've been, when we were in Grenada, we were hashing, doing, 3 to 5 mile hikes every Saturday in the mountains. I was hiking in the Marquesas up at Wapo, up to the trails all the way up to all the spires. That's my normal speed. I get tired coming up and down the stairs to my cabin right now.
Just again for viewers' benefit, Nikki lives on a catamaran, so she's
not quite as steep as on a mile.
An awfully long way to climb. So, and you just pick up on something else you said there. You said the first symptom that you get when you exercise, obviously fatigue, but also the itching comes back when you exercise. Is that right?
Itching and the pain in my jaw. This is kind of my hey, watch what you're doing. That's too much.
So when you're not provoking it with your triggers or with exercise or whatever, you are now free from itching and free from neuropathic pain?
Well, pretty much. I mean, I think I have just sort of a low-grade headache. I don't think, in fact, I was talking to my daughter. I said, it reminds me when I was pregnant with you. I was never a person who was morning sick, but I always just kind of had this crummy head. I didn't feel great. Yeah. And that's kind of what it is. So yeah, I think there are underlying symptoms going on. You asked about antihistamines. I got on antihistamines right away. And again, because I already take a drug that is supposed to assist with neuropathic pain, of course I continued that. I think that remains a help. Once we got to Tahiti, where Ciguatera, and I got to see Dr. Prevost, he put me on. He's dealing both with the severe ear infection and the Ciguatera. So I was on a course of steroids, amoxicillin. I just wrapped up the ear antibiotic drops. I also was he had me on a lactobiotic just to help with any stomach issues, and I really didn't have any stomach issues, but I'm sure that was helpful. And then also he said, and take the antihistamine anytime that itching starts up, just get right back on the antihistamine.
Do you see a benefit from the antihistamines when you take them?
I think so. Yeah, it's a 24-hour one, so it's sort of like, okay,
it's a well to work.
Does this work for us? So for the first week, I took it every day, just without question, and now I've stopped taking it daily, and I've been pretty good. So I did have one day when I really overdid it, and I took the antihistamine.
The steroids, what did they give you? How long did that take to work? Did you see any palpable benefit from it at all, or?
It was a 6-day course of 3 at a certain level and then 3 at a lower level. So
do you think in your own mind that made a difference? The reason I'm pressing you on that is obviously if it's a neurotoxic event, you wouldn't really expect the steroids to make a difference. I wouldn't have thought, but if there was an allergic element to it, then maybe they would. But same with the antihistamines. Do you think they
Yeah,
made
and he gave me 2 more courses to keep in our dispensary on board. He said, you know, if the itching becomes severe again, you might consider taking this again. I have a concern about steroids, so I would never just start it up without having a very specific conversation with a physician. But that was something that he said he really felt would help with the itching. But
what dose of corticosteroids did he give you?
prednisone.
How what 5 milligrams, 20 milligrams?
It's down below, but it was just take like the first day I was taking 3 pills first thing in the morning for 3 days, and then 2 pills first thing in the morning for another 3 days.
Because I've been working with corticosteroid pharmacology throughout my life, and of course the main reason you give them therapeutically is to reduce inflammation and immune reaction, but it also have a anti-swelling effect in neural tissue. So, for example, if you have people with brain edema, you may give very high doses, etc. And we know here that what is believed to give the neurological symptoms is a swelling at the nerve ending. So I don't know. Just a speculation that there may be some benefit on that neural edema by steroid use. That probably a relatively high dose effect.
It sounds though, Anders, that it's too small a dose to do that. If it's 15 milligrams times 5 milligrams, interested in the
that should be high.
Yeah. Interesting. Great story.
Keep going. Yeah, I'm a pretty little person, and I've dropped. I don't know how it converts to kilos, but no, I guess I do know how it converts to kilos. I've dropped probably 6 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah. And between the ear infection and the Ciguatera, I've dropped 6 kilos in less than 2 months.
And is that up now, or are you still dropping? Are you gaining weight again, or?
Well, I hope so, because I fear that what I'm doing is I'm losing a lot of muscle mass because I'm not able to be as active as I usually am. So I am trying to do, simple isometrics and other exercises, anything I can do in a very low impact fashion without causing trouble. Because I know, especially I just turned 64 this week. It's always harder to gain it back if you don't have it once you're age. That's part of why we love life on the boat, is you're always engaging your core, you're always physical, and you're in an environment where you're going ashore, you're having adventures, and that keeps you physically strong. So that is a concern.
I was going to ask you, but the next question is your Papite doctor. He obviously has had a fair amount of experience of Ciguatera. Did he give you an idea of prevalence or in the Polynesian community?
He didn't, but I sure can ask him next time, because I will be seeing him again. Yeah. He said, "Oh, this is always that way." So the way he talks about it is this is not something where he has to go look very hard to research it. It's something he deals with regularly, I believe.
So I had a look through the literature last night, and most of it says, "Oh, there is no way you can tell whether the fish have got Ciguatera." There's various inverted commas old wives' tales about it, and only eat small fish, don't eat big fish, and some things that may or may not be common sense, I don't know. And that made me think, well, there must be some testings. There's a PCR test, a DNA test, which is conducted on environmental samples on the reef, to determine whether the reef is hosting that Gambier diplococcus, or whatever it's called. But interestingly, they've not been able to correlate the prevalence of the organism with diseases, with episodes of Ciguatera. So they're not doing environmental testing on a regular basis to determine which reefs are safe, which reefs aren't safe, because I guess the data isn't there. I guess while that remains the case, it's a lottery as to whether you go into a restaurant and eat a parrotfish or a barracuda in Polynesia, whether you end up with the Nicky disease, which just sounds awful. What's your attitude to eating?
I would say, and I am saying to friends who are coming this way, just don't eat the fish. And we eat, and in the time that we've been sailing, we catch a lot of tuna, we catch a lot of mahi-mahi, we catch a lot of fish on crossing. We've been able to freeze it. We have the freezer that we've used. So fish is a main component, has been a main component of our diet. There aren't, part of why we were able to avoid it in the Caribbean, I think, is there just weren't as many reef fish to shoot. It's this part of the world being more remote. The fish are so abundant and so healthy. I mean, Jamie, while he was still fishing in the coral, said the hardest part for him was finding a fish small enough. There were just so many beautiful, large predators. He's here. He's passing me right now.
And I failed.
He failed.
Right.
So our advice to everyone is don't play the roulette. This is to eat the reef fish in this part of the world is like playing Russian roulette. I simply wouldn't do it. Be specific. If it's not tuna, if it's not a pelagic fish, I wouldn't eat it.
Interesting.
Mickey,
I understand
from when I read it.
I'll ask a question, Mickey, if possible. Can you just bring Jamie on?
Oh, heck.
Is this like is this just information, or is this going to get posted as a video?
Do you want to? He doesn't have a shirt. You want to put a shirt on, or
That's
you
okay.
Okay. Here comes Captain Krabby.
Hi, Jamie. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I just, as a lifelong fisherman and witness to what happened to Nicky, I just wondered if you still eat fish.
Actually, I'm eating fish without an issue. I mean, obviously pelagics. I'm steering clear of reef fish right now, and obviously I must be carrying a pretty big sig load at the moment if Nicky got so sick. But really, I'm almost symptom free. The only thing that'll bring on a symptom is if I have 3 or 4 drinks in close succession. My hands and my feet were getting itchy, but even that has subsided. So yeah, I'm still eating fish, which is tough because I'm disinclined to eat our favorite food in front of Nicky, and she can't have it. I've not been cooking very much fish lately, but yeah, I'll eat it out on the street. And if we have guests over, I'll cook a fish dish and a non-fish dish, and I don't seem to have any adverse effect from it.
Interesting.
But look, I'm considerably larger than Nicky is. Gram for gram, there's quite a bit more fat on me than there is on Nicky. I mean, maybe not necessarily as a body percentage, but just look at the size of me. And I actually had a few reef fish meals that she didn't. So I consumed a lot more fish than she did. And I think I understand there's a pretty huge variability just between individuals and susceptibility to being affected by the toxins. So maybe I'm just less affected than she is.
Yeah. So it must be pretty scary for you being out in the middle of nowhere and suddenly your wife is poleaxed by intense headache, jaw pain, intense itching, breathing difficulties.
It was not nice. I quickly sailed single-handed overnight to an island with some medical facilities just in case.
I read somewhere, I don't know how they calculate this, but there is a mortality associated to Ciguatera of about 1 in 1,000, I think the number was. And certainly I know of people that have, well, I know of guys that have been killed by not Ciguatera, but the blue-green algae shellfish poisoning down in Patagonia, and very rapidly because of neurotoxicity. So scary thing, not something you kind of trifle with, really.
Well, yeah, but again, I think the load in fish varies tremendously, and I can imagine if somebody with a heart condition who ate a giant portion of a very large coral trout that lived in really hot water would die. Whereas, I think that's all the holes in the Swiss cheese lining up. I'm not too worried about dying from it. It's just an inconvenient disease for us.
But I can tell you about, it's a secondhand information, but a Dutch guy who crossed the Atlantic with the Arc Plus in 2020 when we crossed, he later on got Ciguatera in northern Australia, and he had to be evacuated due to cardiac failure, and spent young, well-trained, I think he was in his upper 40s, early 50s, and he spent 3 months in intensive care. So it can be serious.
Oh, very, very serious. And we, obviously since talking about it, I have had people reach out to me privately who have had to deal with it in the past. And we all say the same thing. We wouldn't wish it on our worst enemy. And we all walk away from it saying just do what you can to avoid it, because it's not a great thing. It's it's like everything else in the life of sailing. You have to be able to sort of get through the crisis and then look ahead and then share with others what you can avoid it.
If I understand the literature correctly, it's also so that the Pacific versions, because there's a number of subclasses of the toxin, and it seems that the toxin in the Pacific is generally significantly more potent and more so toxic in smaller amounts than the one in the Caribbean.
Absolutely. And the thing, one of the things I've told a lot of folks is I've sent a link to a chart that shows the number of instances per 100,000 in places all over the globe. And it's almost, the Tuamotu is almost the highest place on the planet. I think there was somewhere in Malaysia that was higher, and somewhere in India that was higher, but it's 1,900 in every 100,000. And most other places in the world, even that are considered hotspots in the Caribbean, it's more like a factor of a few hundred in 100,000. So this is a very seriously hot place.
I can tell you what the incidence in mid Wales, and it's 0. So,
are you 100%? Because I read that there are cases of fish that had been sold or transported on the world fish markets that have been sold in remote places on the world, and I got isolated cases which
I may not
be easily recognized if they end up in the hospital in Gothenburg. But
I read about an outbreak in New York that was very severe because
it's where the fish goes, or where the person has gone. My niece is an emergency room doctor in San Leandro, California, and the cases that she has seen have been someone who returns from a trip, and they're dealing with what's left from something they ate on a trip.
The longer lasting.
I also learned that there have been some small outbreaks in South Spain and the Canary Islands, etc. So it does also exist in Europe nowadays.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's awful because one of the things I've been reading a lot lately. I've got time on my hands, but with the water temperatures in the seas increasing, the spread is going further and further from the equator, so further north and further south. So places that had not had to deal with it are now having to teach fishermen how to be more thoughtful about what fish they either catch and what they consume.
And again,
hopefully we will get some rabbit tests in the future so we can test the food before we eat it. But
yeah, we have a guide that we've used all our years. The Cruiser's Guide to Fishing. And when it was published, which is maybe 15 years ago, there was a brief period of time where they thought they had a test that you could actually test an individual fish. But that was only a few years where they felt like that test was viable. The problem was it had so many false negatives. It just wasn't worth using. Now, there is sort of the sailor's lore that on the long voyages, once they got to the island areas, they would feed it to the ship's cat first and then wait a day. And if the cat didn't die, they'd eat the fish the next day.
that's
I think that's why Jamie was showing off our little Commander Whisker Face back here.
She always eats the scraps when I prepare
I
fish,
know.
and she didn't get sick.
Well,
maybe we should cat laboratory mice.
Yeah, she doesn't get any more reef fish ever again. All she gets is tuna. So
it's fantastic. Brilliant. Just to clarify something I said before,
The biocide.
the PCR test isn't for testing for the toxin, it's testing for the organism that produces the toxin. So it's testing environmental symptoms to see whether the reef is capable of producing the toxin that then accumulates in the fish as it cascades up the food chain. Wow, what a great story. Nikki, can you thank Jamie for his contribution? I think that was actually very valuable. And it really does highlight the fact that it is, it's different to everybody, isn't it? It's interesting that he associates mild tingling or itching in the fingers as he's maybe had a bit too much fish today and obviously escaped what you did on a similar process. Thank you very much for his contribution and for being press ganged onto this online stream. It will be posted.
I will add one more thing. The deeper I dug, there is now a second creature, another dinoflagellate with a different name. I'm not going to remember, but they're just now starting to see cases from another toxin. And it's possible that why mine didn't have any gastrointestinal symptoms, why mine's had a particular course could have something to do with that. And this is where it's emerging. This new neurotoxin is emerging here in Polynesia.
A difficult question for you, Nikki, but we see gastrointestinal disturbance in neuropathic diseases of the bowel. We see that particularly in diabetes, etc. Do you think that the neurotoxicity causes the gastrointestinal disorder, or do you think there's something else going along there in the more lines of the more normal food poisoning that we would associate with? I guess there's quite a few bugs that produce gastrotoxins or enterotoxins, cholera being one of them.
Yeah, and who knows? Just like in any creature has the bell curve of what it has, whatever characteristic it has. And I would say the people that I've known who've had it in the Caribbean, especially in the Bahamas, every single one of them had the gastrointestinal start. And to them, that was the most horrible part of it. And that's the thing that gets triggered now if, as they were recovering, if they had a trigger, if they ate fish or they had alcohol, they had gastrointestinal symptoms again. Whereas for me, the symptoms were so quickly and so strongly more neuropathic pain related, and that's what triggers for me as well.
Interesting. I guess the fact that they're still getting ongoing triggering symptoms of the gastrointestinal side implies that's more to do with the nervous control of the bowel, because the bowel has a lot of nerves in it, than actually something going on in the bowel itself. So maybe it is just part of the spectrum of neurotoxicity. Really interesting story. Exercise in is pathophysiology, I guess. Well, certainly for me, I'm sure for Anders too. But Anders, do you want to anything you want to wrap up with? I don't know how long we've been going, but we should probably start to think about that.
I just would like to come back to this interesting observation of the herbal medicine here. I mean, this plant, is that something that only exists in Tuamotus, or would you find that plant also in the Caribbean? And that's the first question. And the other thing is, did you get any sense for how long this knowledge have been in the Tuamotus population that they can use this plant? Is it something that is in the last decade, or because Ciguatera, I understand, have been around for ages?
Yeah. It was interesting. In the Caribbean, people used to refer to being the fishermen in particular. When Jamie would talk with them, well, what's safe here? What do you eat here? They would give you the list of the things that were okay, and then they would talk about, oh, but then there's that time I ate that too big barracuda and I wound up on the drip. So fishermen will talk to each other about, oh, when were you on the drip? Have you been on the drip? So that would be the mannitol that you were talking about. If you can get an immediate IV infusion of mannitol, it helps to remove some of the neurotoxin. That's what I understand. So that you do hear that a lot in the Caribbean, and particularly the French islands. So it's interesting that here we have French Polynesia and then the French Antilles. Obviously, they've been dealing with it for a long time, because that those waters have had that issue as long as people have been coming in ships from Europe and showing up in islands.
I think it was first described.
I looked at it in the science around the treatment, and first of all, I mean, I think it's nothing you do as a field medicine. It's nothing, because my first question was, should I have mannitol on board? But you should have access to very big veins to give it, preferably a central vein catheter. And also the scientific evidence for the effect is based on 10 small uncontrolled studies, and there's only one controlled study that was inconclusive. So it's a little bit uncertain from a pure scientific perspective how effective mannitol is. And mannitol is not a trivial thing to treat with. So I think that's and it has to be given within 10 hours, most likely, to be effective. So it's probably not a real option for if we're catching it in our remote yachting locations. I guess my understanding is that the mode of action is that it's there to reduce the edema in the neural tissue, which is what is used in other circumstances. But it has a major diuretic effect, so maybe it also increases the clearance of whatever toxin is in the plasma. But I think most of the toxin is out in the peripheral tissue anyhow. So I think I think the effect of mannitol, if it's there, is probably on the neural endings.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
I'll never know.
Vicky, is there anything else you want to wind up with? It's been a really illuminating chat, and I'm sure people will appreciate it. Your very candid description and very colourful description of what you went through in a very remote part of the world. Thank you very much.
Well, and it's another one of the beauties of OCC. There, so many people have been helpful, even if just to say, "Oh my goodness, is there anything we can do?" When we were still in the anchorages, people would offer to, hey, Jamie, do you need a hand with anything? Since I was really not able, and it'll be a while. Right now we are going. He sails under the assumption that he's solo sailing. Because it's so easy for me to overexert in doing even just little things that we're just saying, okay, Captain Krabby's solo sailing right now. And obviously I would be able to rise to the occasion if there was a serious situation, but for a while, it's going to be on him.
Just how are you dealing with this long-lasting symptoms psychologically? Is it depressing or?
I have some really great supports with that, starting with our son and daughter, who are absolutely fantastic and totally know what's going on. We all have our each other's backs. The three of us have, as they say, we've done the work. We've all been through therapy, so we're in good shape and we know how to help each other. So yeah, sure. It's just there are moments of discouragement. Like I said, with the holy cats, I'm going from someone who could take an 8-mile hike up and down mountains to someone who is exhausted from the simplest of things. But I've got a very encouraging spouse. We have a wonderful cat. She seems to know that something's wrong with me. She's a feral cat that we adopted in Tunisia, who's not super come sit in your lap girl. She's just right next to me when I have to rest, as if she knows something's going on. So that's huge. But thank you for asking, because that's an important thing to recognize when something like this happens.
Is the fatigue starting to improve at all, Nikki? You quantified
bit by bit.
The companion way, but can you walk a mile now? Can you walk a kilometer? Can you walk 100 yards? How is it?
I don't think I would walk a mile. Could I? I probably could, but I think I would pay for it for a few days afterwards. We did a shopping. We did a shopping at the Carrefour earlier this week, and it was probably a kilometer back, and I was pretty tired the next day. But you gotta, it's like anything, you gotta push a little bit against it, and every day you get better.
Well, I am going to wind up.
I ask you slightly...
One more question. Yagan, go ahead, Yagan.
No, it's a little peripheral question, but I saw in some other communication with Nikki that you have a little bit of challenge as your 90 days expires to stay in French Polynesia. And did you find out if your health issues is a justified reason to get the immigration authorities to prolong your stay? I think that may be good for other yachts to know whether that's a possibility or not.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. Jamie and I will have an appointment tomorrow with what is the company, Jamie?
Tahiti Crew Finders.
Tahiti Crew Finders is going to assist us, the agent here in Papeete, helping us look at getting the kinds of appointments it'll take so that we can extend our stay. That's not just because of my health issue. We also have a mechanical issue that we can't proceed. Yeah.
Nikki, putting an amazingly brave face on it. I'm going to stop the recording, and we can chat for a bit afterwards if you wish, but I'll stop the recording. Right. If I do so, I'll just point out that I'm going to post this on the OCC forum, so that will stay there forever. It will go on our webinar page as well, and it will go out in our OCC newsfeed to various social media. Is that okay with you?
Totally fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. We've taken advantage of those. We're coming up on our 6 years of membership. So
I need to commend to you also the series that I'm doing with the people going through the Northwest Passage at the moment. Great bunch of people, very interesting stories, and we're going to follow them every 2 weeks. So it keeps me vicariously enjoying the Arctic, which is just wonderful. But thank you very much, Nikki. I'm going to stop the record button and thank you, but I'll keep the lines open in case you want to say anything else. So stopping now.